Good morning, my name is Simeon Smaill from Scion, and I will be presenting information from the Resilient Forests program in this presentation. Although I will be presenting these set of slides, there's a huge team that underpins the activity in the Resilient Forests program, so I just want to acknowledge that wide and diverse contribution as well. So, the establishment and the goals of the Resilient Forest program is where I'd like to start. So the program itself builds on past research that was undertaken in the Growing Confidence in Forestry's Future program and the Healthy Trees, Healthy Future program. So selected research areas and concepts from within these two past bodies of work were identified and discussed with a range of stakeholders, including representatives from the Forest Owners Association, Forest Growers Research and the New Zealand Farm Forestry Association. And that research was discussed and iterated to form what became the basis of the Resilient Forests research program. And one of the key concepts underneath that was considering what would happen if we followed business as usual practices from now into the future, and what the impact that would be on our profit when we consider an increasing body of risks that the industry is facing, such as loss of social license, poor forest health, potential for reduced wood quality, culminating in a significant potential for productivity decline. And some projections were done that show that there's a potential for an annual loss of $1.3 billion in net present value, taken from projections from 2018 values. So the Resilient Forest program is really looking to address these issues, and indeed the work that we've done showing what could happen if we mitigate these factors or indeed advance beyond them shows that if we can gain public endorsement, greater support for forestry, if we can improve forest health, if we can produce better wood quality, overall resulting in enhanced productivity, there is a potential to actually go the other direction and not just save $1.3 billion that could be lost, but actually add a further $1.3 billion in annual net present value. So overall, the idea is to use the research around enhancing productivity and improving public endorsement to de-risk current and future forest investment. Now, the Resilient Forest program is based on three central research areas. The first one of these is managing uncertainty and risk. Now, this involves components that are around looking at things like applying portfolio approaches to assess multiple risks simultaneously, things like changes from climate change, market issues, disease incursions and public concerns, and then using that information to develop tools and frameworks to help anticipate where those threats might occur and what the potential responses to them might be that maintain productivity and social license to operate. And then thinking about how you can actually apply those processes within adaptive management for our forests so they are future-proofed against whatever risk might come along. The activities that are going to be undertaken to deliver on these goals include looking at the drivers of social license and really trying to understand what people actually want from forestry and how perceptions of forestry and how forestry is managed will shape future investment. And putting that all together, there's another activity around understanding how we can use that information to actually help manage risk, both physical and social, while retaining that social license. So there's a lot of work that's undertaken under these areas. Some of that's going to be reported in detail in future presentations, but I'm just going to provide a couple of snapshots from some of the work done under RA1 now. So looking at the triggers and drivers of social license. This was explored with a survey followed by focus group decisions, taking in a wide sort of swathe of people involved in forestry, one way or the other. And overall, across a diverse range of communities, it was found that forestry was valued and forests and forestry practices were generally considered acceptable. However, there were sensitive issues and that were identified around the need to consider environmental benefits, aesthetics and other personal values and how those were reflected in forest management. And there was also a very clear signal that the New Zealand public does want to see investment from forestry into native forests and alternative management tools. But it was also really clear that they didn't expect the entire forestry sector to change to these. It's just if there was some investment that would be seen as beneficial and it would reflect well across the entire forestry sector, whether it's still conventional forestry or using some of these alternative management tools. Another area that we've looked at is how we grow our forests and the implications of that. So there's a lot of work from other primary sectors looking at the wider impacts of land management and crop management with regard to, is this activity of benefit or a risk to social, environmental or cultural values, just going beyond financial and economic returns. And it's become an increasingly important factor in market access and consumer decisions. So to look at this for forestry, Scion engaged with a panel of experts who are involved in looking at trends in primary sector industries, and a number of key points came out. That FSC certification was going to be of increasing significance. Reduced chemical use was clearly going to be considered advantageous for market access, and there was a need for a clear chain of custody. This piece of wood was provided by people following good labour policies, and that the soil and water resources that built that piece of wood are protected. And this goes with the trend of increasingly seeing investment determined by environmental, social and ethical criteria. So next I'm going to move on to the next research area, which is productivity enhancement. And this contains a range of various topics which I'm sure are familiar to people, such as improving nutrition, improving phenotyping and modelling tools, looking at the role of the microbiome, and then moving on to the silvicultural side, looking at opportunities to improve stand uniformity and productivity. And then if all of these things work and we have faster growing, better trees, what are the impacts of shorter rotations on wood quality? And again, the activities going on under this area really map onto these well. So again, looking at changes in wood properties, modelling tree growth and dynamics, also maximising knowledge gains from our long-term trials such as Puraki and the accelerator trials, enhancing our remote sensing capability, looking at responses to nutrient management and exploring the role of the microbiome. Now again, you'll be getting some presentations on specific aspects of this work, so I'm just going to provide an overview of a couple of areas here. So in terms of nutrient management, we're looking in detail at nutrient responses. This is being looked at in the accelerator trials, driven by the use of the nutrient balance model NUBAM, really figuring out the best possible moments to add nutrients, and nitrogen in this case, and trying to get as much as possible in that into the tree to get the biggest possible growth gain. And that's actually working really well at those sites where we're getting some strong successes there. But we're also going beyond that a little bit, trying to improve precision in predicting fertiliser response, not just looking at the pools of nutrients at a site, but also understanding how much of that pool is actually available. So it's changing the paradigm a little bit, but it is proving to be quite beneficial. Another area that we're working in is looking at micronutrients, so manganese, molybdenum, zinc, for example, as well as boron. Now, we're not just taking the approach of trying to diagnose what micronutrients the current crop of tree needs, we're actually looking at how we can apply it to the site so we get the entire ecosystem out of a micronutrient deficiency. So not just the current crop will be more productive, but all future crops of trees at that site as well. And we're also trying to underpin this work by improving our ability to analyse nutrients through high throughput systems. And these are based on spectral analysis. So the first area that we're looking at is using remote hyperspectral analysis. So basically flying a drone over a forest, and that is able to take readings with hyperspectral imagery of the nitrogen and phosphorus in the needles of the tree. So we can sort of get this real-time map of the dynamics of the nitrogen and phosphorus through the forest. And then in the lab, we're using infrared analysis to predict soil properties, a much faster and more efficient approach than traditional chemistry-based analysis. Another area of note is the work being done in the microbiome of needles and wood. So we've developed a new protocol to detect oomycetes, probably better known to which include Phytophthora and radiata pine, and we're looking to deploy this across further trials as well. And we're also making quite significant advances looking in the microbiome present in the bark and wood. So we've got samples now that show that rather than being sort of a desert, we're seeing a diverse microbial community living inside the cambium and the wood of the trees, well, that are quite old in some cases. So we're looking at potentially up to 70 in fungal species and 400 bacterial species living inside the tree. So there are this raises a lot of questions around what are they doing and what are our opportunities to influence them, because if those fungi are present, if those bacteria are present, they are active, they are doing something. And this could potentially provide significant new opportunities to alter the tree metabolism and the wood properties within the tree after it's actually been formed. The next research area that the program is supporting is looking at enhanced resilience. And this includes things such as the development of alternative disease control tools, looking at the epidemiology and spread of needle diseases, tools for surveilling disease emergence and movement, and also some work looking at the actual impacts of disease. What's the relative impact of changes in the extent of disease on tree growth and wood quality through time? And again, the activities that are being undertaken in these areas map pretty closely to these goals. So again, epidemiology and spread, the landscape level effects of disease emergence, opportunities to create resistance to pathogens through potentially greater diversity of the tree crop, but also chemical control and disease management. So a couple of overviews from this area include looking at epidemiology and spread. So Scion has purchased some high-resolution imagery over a wide area of the New Zealand planted estate, and we're looking to use this to help improve a predictive model that can provide early indications of disease severity. And this imagery is actually able to be processed and pick up the impact or the incidence of disease prior to the naked eye being able to pick it up. So we're working with an external provider, Indafor, to develop a method to automatically identify red needlecast outbreaks based on this imagery far before we'd ever be able to see it in person. There's also work going on using UAV captured imagery to score individual trees to understand how the extent of the disease that they might have, red needlecast in this case, is actually going to impact their growth through time. So again, important information to understand the resources we need to commit to fighting red needlecast. Another area we're working in is looking at alternatives to copper. And recently there was a workshop at Scion held with scientists and stakeholders, and that really discussed stakeholder perspectives on the future of copper in New Zealand. How long can we keep using it? And what information do we have around alternatives to copper, different control tools that we could use? And the next steps from this workshop is to develop a roadmap for operational tools that could be used against Dothostroma in the short, medium and long term in a world where copper is not available. So another area I'd like to touch on is the interactions between these research areas as well, which is a real strength of the program, that we have research going on in quite distinct areas, but we can pull them together within the structure of the program. So if you consider the intersection between RA1 and RA2, there's clear overlap in terms of looking at shorter rotations through enhanced productivity, but what does this mean for market risk? What does this mean for wood quality and where those products might be able to be sold? Between RA1 and RA3, again, there's clear interaction space between thinking about how we can integrate disease risk and climate change risk simultaneously, but also thinking about how our options for chemical use, current or in future, how they might be viewed by the public and what social risk elements they might bring. But there are also huge overlaps as well between RA2 and RA3 when you consider the potential for crossover between pathogen and between the management of pathogens and beneficial microbes, how changes in genetics to improve productivity, changes in genetics to improve in silviculture to improve productivity might enhance disease risk, and integrating disease and biotic risk into growth models, so again, we can understand how disruptions to growth should actually properly be modelled. And put all together, this just adds to the platform we're trying to build around de-risking forest investment. Well, thank you very much for your attention, and at this point I'd like to acknowledge all the hard work and effort that's gone into this program from all the researchers that are involved in it so far. But I'd also like to acknowledge the efforts of the forestry companies who have supported this work and the access they have provided to the various trial sites that underpin the work we are doing. And I'd like to take any questions on this presentation at the end of the session. And thanks again.